There you go. All right. So, hello, this is Dr. Marquez with Voice of Puerto Rico. We are conducting one of our Voices program interview, and I want you all to be introduce to a friend of mine who's gonna talk to us about his experience in Puerto Rico with Hurricane Maria and what has been his experience after Hurricane Maria. Could you tell us your name, please?
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Roberto Micheri. I'm an educator down in Puerto Rico. I've worked in professional development and I've taught for about 20 years now. I'm currently working in project management and running different educational programs, both for schools and private companies, adult education. It's a grab bag of different things I'm doing right now, but it's all education related over the last 20 years.
It's all education related.
It's all education related. It's education sales, professional development, project management in the education field.
Okay, awesome. Roberto, I've known you actually for many years, and you've
Yes.
already contributed with a white paper. I think yours was the first white paper to Voices. We've also seen many of your posts on your experience post Maria, but I wanted to hear directly from you. Where were you, and what was your experience during the hurricane?
Well, the day the hurricane hit, I was actually home. I'm currently providing professional services for an education company, and we had all prepared for the hurricane. We had all taken the day off. We had all made arrangements so everybody could be safe and at home. But despite knowing how big the hurricane was, I don't think any of us were ready for what was coming. I was home, and at least 4 hours before the hurricane actually hit us, we were without power right from the start. Around 10 a.m., we lost power. We didn't have power for close to 60 days after that. And we stayed home. I live in the metropolitan area, Guaynabo. It's not San Juan, but it's very close. And I live in a building, sixth floor, and we spent it in the apartment. At first, it was just rain. We had prepared in terms of barricading the windows, making sure we had some towels to cover the undersides of doors and the balcony, get everything inside the house. But we were not ready for how hard it hit in terms of the rain pouring in, the wind, the windows just flying open. And it was a harrowing experience. It seemed like 4 to 5 days, not 12 hours, just sitting at the apartment. Being in a building, the building moved because of the wind. So you could feel it like a little earthquake. And at that point, my wife said, let's leave the apartment. Let's go downstairs to the lobby. And we tried to open the doors, and they had closed because of the pressure in the apartment. So we're pretty much trapped in the apartment. And that was a little unnerving, but eventually some neighbors heard us, and they helped us open the door. They got a screwdriver, a hammer, and they made a wedge and opened the door. So, but by that time, the worst of the storm was over, and we spent it here in the apartment. The radio went out. I don't know if you know this, but the AM radio, the major station, they lost their ceiling during the storm. So you were listening to the AM radio, bringing in reports, and all of a sudden they're going like, "Oh, we've lost our ceiling. We're moving to another studio," and then they went off the air. So for a while there, you were incommunicated, no cell phone, no radio, just the wind, and it was harrowing. I had lived in Puerto Rico all my life, and I haven't experienced any big hurricane like this. Hugo in 1989, 88, I'm not sure right now. We were without power for about 2 weeks, and it was, for me, what I thought of as a big hurricane, and it was nothing compared to Maria. And I was lucky in terms that my job restarted the week after the hurricane. So I only spent about 5 days in the apartment, and then I started going back home. Back to the office, and at least keeping active. But the hurricane itself, I was right here at home, where I'm recording right now.
Wow. What was your experience after all of this ended? What has been your experience after the hurricane?
Well, immediately after the hurricane, it was disheartening, first of all, because you looked around and there was a huge amount of destruction, just in terms of the trees that fell, the roads were blocked, the traffic lights had flown off and landed on cars. We we live in a row of buildings. It's all apartment buildings, and people started going downstairs, removing trees. The government wasn't coming out immediately because roads were blocked. We can reach everywhere at once. And I'm aware there were places worse off than we were. We had a blocked road or no power. There were places in the interior of the island where bridges had fallen and communities were incommunicated. So we understand that there are priorities in terms of how the government deals with this emergency. So the local community just took it upon themselves to start clearing the roads. Um, it was difficult not knowing what was going to happen, not knowing how the infrastructure was going to be rebuilt, because that was a big concern and it's still a big concern. But in terms of the community, it was a great experience because neighbors talk to neighbors they don't usually talk to. We spend evenings down in the building lobby sharing our experience of what was going on. When cell phone service started coming out, so we'd share what we could learn from, or somebody called me from such and such place, or I reached somebody in Mayagüez and they told me it's like this and like that. So it was a slow period of recovery. The the lack of electricity was also difficult because since I live in a building, I don't have even the ability to get a generator. People have their personal generators, they get their gas, and they at least have some hours of electricity inside their apartment. Since I live in a building and the code in the apartment building means you can't have your own generator, you only have electricity in the common areas. Like you'll have power for the elevators and the corridors inside the apartment for certain hours of the day. So your day has to be arranged around the 2 hours in the morning where you have power to go up and down in the elevator, go out and shop for whatever you need, and then the 2 hours in the afternoon where you have to come in, take a bath, because once they turn off power for the building, the water stops working because we have a cistern that relies on electricity to pump water up to the apartments. So for those first 50 odd 60 days, it was a change in routine. I started going to the office, but the office was running on generator. We had a shorter work day because it was difficult getting gasoline, diesel specifically, for the power plant. So it was a challenge, but we slowly overcame. And right now I'm lucky because I have power. According to the newspaper today, only 56% of residential clients of the Puerto Rico Power Authority have power in their home. At least that's what the newspaper said this morning.
56%, and we are on day 95?
95, yes.
Yeah.
I think it's 95, wow. 96. It's, according to the newspaper this morning, it's 56% of power in residential areas. And since we're in the metro area, and although recovery wasn't immediately quick because the power generation occurs in the south part of the island, and the lines that distribute power up to the north or through the east were down, we didn't have power for those first few weeks. But once those lines were connected and poles were put up, we've started seeing power come in pockets in the metro area. But if you go to the interior, it's still bad. I was talking to a friend who's working with the private companies that are going into stores that were devastated by the hurricane and still have products inside of them, like clothing or pharmacies that were devastated by the storm. And they have a company that comes in and cleans it because it has mold, it's been damaged, it needs to be picked up with special equipment. And he was going to the interior of the island yesterday, and he still says roads are still blocked because of landslides. It's still a hassle to get to these places. We need to get trucks up to these areas to remove materials from these stores, and trucks can't get up there. So I'm only speaking of secondhand experience here. I barely traveled outside the metro area in the last 90 days.
And is that usually your routine, or you travel around the island a lot?
No, I usually travel around the island a lot. In my line of work, I usually either provide professional development services or trainings around the island, and we have projects for the company I'm working with around the island. But since the hurricane and it's still, there's so many areas still without power, especially if you go towards the east of the island, where we're doing some projects. You can't really do anything there. Schools are working there maybe half a day because they don't have power, so they're in a special schedule. So no, I usually travel a whole lot more outside of the metro area, but since the hurricane, it's like I'm confined into the globe of stability that is, well, stability that is the metro area.
And you mentioned schools still not open.
The,
Are
the,
they working part times? Is it because they still don't have water and electricity that they're not open? Is it infrastructural damage?
this,
Combination perhaps of both?
I'll give you this caveat. Although I provide services to schools, I'm not working so much directly with so many schools, mostly in the metro area and the east right now. Most schools are open. According to the Department of Education, I think over 95% are open. Not all of them are working on their regular schedule. For
Mm,
example, if schools don't have power or have no water, then they'll typically have classes like from 8 a.m. to noon or 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. and have shorter classes. Then students are dismissed after that time. Schools that have electricity are running usually regular hours.
I see.
And water is not that much of a problem right now. I think we've got most of the island with at least some running water going. It's close to 80-90%. In areas where there's water problem, I'm sorry I interrupted you. It's usually areas located in high, I'm being redundant here, but high areas in hills, mountains, where the pumps need electricity to get the water up there. If the electricity fails there, then they have limited water in this area,
Right,
limited water supply in these areas.
right. What do you think are the current biggest challenges that the island is facing from your perspective?
Yeah, it, I think that restoring the electrical grid to at least the majority of the island, it's a big problem in terms of getting the economy running normally. Most hospitals have power now. Most commercial centers or distribution and manufacturing have power, but it's not all of them. With so many people still not having power, it's hard for life to return to normal. And I can't blame the local government for not getting the electricity running immediately. You know, the destruction was so immense that you can't really think that they will fix it right away. But since we were hit by the hurricane in the midst of an economic crisis in the island, the power authority being in an austerity program, it was a perfect storm to just make a bad situation worse. Right now, if we could get electricity reestablished and supplies running everywhere, it would do greatly to help normalize the island. I'm also worried about the the specter of, and I'm veering off to another topic here, but the tax reform in the states is
Mhm.
currently poised to impose I think it's a 12.5 interest on goods manufactured in Puerto Rico and going off to the states. That would be a horrible blow to our economy. Our manufacturing economy has shrunk incredibly over the last couple of decades, and that could be a death knell and force more companies to leave the island and really worsen an existing crisis. I think that tax in the middle of our current situation is just another blow over an already bruised body.
I see. There are concerns currently with the relationship to the tax bill and the notion that Puerto Rico is being classified as a foreign entity or a foreign nation of some sort, and that's why it's being taxed so high. Uh, we have been in Voice of Puerto Rico and other groups locally of the diaspora have been working very hard to try to get some changes on the language of those legislations. There have been some certain degree of change, uh, at least numbers wise, we were facing at a greater number. Uh,
True.
at the beginning of the month, and at this point it has decreased. Um, are there any other concerns in terms of the financial situation of the island that you think people are missing out on discussing, or people are not really talking about here in the States, that might be something that will be worth advocating for at the higher levels?
Well, I'm I have not. I haven't experienced this in firsthand because damage to my home was minimal. My cars were a little affected by the hurricane, but we're dealing with our insurance company, and it seems to be, at least everything seems to be going smoothly right now. But I keep hearing from people that my insurance company has not paid or is taking forever to pay. We're
Right.
suffering less than what we expected. It's so. I'll give you a concrete example. My father's widow, she had a second floor apartment in her main house, and she rented it out. It was a prefab structure with the ceiling was wood and zinc. It wasn't a super strong structure, and it just flew off with the hurricane. She right away decided, well, I'm going to do some improvements to the house and I'm going to fix the ceiling. And she spent a good chunk of her savings on getting that ceiling fixed. The insurance company hadn't replied till yesterday. 90 odd days. She went and did the paperwork right away next week as soon as the company was open, and they did not reply till this week. And she's getting less than half of what she invested in fixing the house. And it also has to do with cost of supplies and materials and everything increasing after the hurricane, and then with the insurance companies providing it's small. And I keep hearing, and again, this is something you hear repeatedly, we're not getting responses quickly from the insurance companies. We're not getting the help we need. So.
Have you heard similar stories with relationship to FEMA assistance in the island?
Uh, there was at least in the newspapers, a lot of coverage about FEMA taking forever to provide services. When the hurricane occurred, FEMA activated a web page where you could register and say, well, this is where I'm located. They were giving out some assistance if for expenses. And I went into the website, filled it out, not knowing whether I would get assistance or not. So, but I went through the process of filling it. I never heard back from FEMA personally. I know people that got their $500 for expenses, and then I got a call this week from somebody from FEMA that they were going to come over to check the apartment. We made we set a date for them to come, and they had a personal situation where I'm working. I was going to take some time off from work and come be here for when they arrive to do the inspection. But I couldn't be here. I called them and said, you know what? I can't take this time off from work. I have things to do. They haven't called back, so I don't know. I think FEMA took, from what you read in the newspapers and what you hear people talking about, it feels like they took a while to respond. The feeling here is that the federal government took too long to respond to an emergency that we knew would happen. Nobody might have known the scope and the amount of destruction that was going to happen, but we had this hurricane barreling towards us, and it's not a tornado that springs out of nowhere. It's a hurricane that you've been tracking for a couple of days. Response was so slow. I think it's improved. Uh, I don't. It's sad because you get electricity and your work starts, returns to normal, and you follow your routine, and you forget that you're living in a 44% of the island, whereas 56 are still struggling with this. And I'm trying not to do that, but it's easy to just lose perspective. I have power, my family has power, we'll go on, that's it. We need to all be aware that it's still an ongoing process. And the Army Corps of Engineers said last week, I heard this on the radio, that the majority of the island wouldn't have power till February, and some areas may not have it till March.
Wow.
And it's hard living in the 19th century in the midst of the 21st.
Wow. There's a lot of concern currently, and not a lot of people are talking about this, but I've been
Yes.
concerned about it because it has impacted the state of Virginia mental health practice with relationship to the factories in Puerto Rico that are either not yet open or are working on partial schedules because some of the top medications that are used in the United States are developed and manufactured in Puerto Rico. Amongst those, several antipsychotic medications, several antidepressant and anti-anxiolytic anxiety medications, and several ADHD attention deficit disorder medications. Uh, do you have, and again, this is an on-script interview, and if you don't have information about this, that would be fine. But I'm wondering if have you heard anything around the notion of these factories, pharmaceutical companies that are in the island, if there's a big concern with them not opening, and how is this affecting not just the economy but also the well-being of people in the island that are dependent of their work to be able to exist.
I'm I'm not aware of specifics of the manufacturing plants and the pharmaceutical companies. I know the government has made a big push to get them going. First of all, because they're part of the engine that keeps the economy running, and second of all, because I'm pretty sure that their fear is they're not being manufactured here. They're going to start manufacturing them somewhere else. And once they start manufacturing them somewhere else, the jobs won't come back, especially with the tax coming up on top of that. So, about specifics, I don't know. People are very stressed out. It's you if you don't have your work and that means you don't have money to pay for your bills, it's it's very difficult. The most banks here in Puerto Rico had a moratorium where payments were deferred for 3 months. So September, October, and November, many people didn't have to pay their car loans, their credit cards. Some didn't have to pay their mortgages. Depends on the type of mortgage you had, and that's ending now in December. People have to go back. Some people are going to have to some banks are going to defer the payment to the end of your loan, but some of them are going to ask you to pay those 3 months now in December. So once that moratorium is over and have to start paying, and some of them don't have jobs, that's going to be another crisis that could loom in the near future.
Wow.
Yeah. I also read people are stressed and depressed, and the tone that they speak, that they post or share with you face to face or on social media uh, lets you know that people are not feeling well. People are putting on a brave face, but they're depressed, they're saddened. I had an acquaintance post on Facebook yesterday. I'm considering suicide, and I was terribly concerned about this person who was so desperate that that would be his Facebook status. And I don't think this is a matter of just calling attention. I think he's really that desperate. He doesn't have power. He has a baby. His work hasn't normalized yet. It's we may be creating a semblance of normality in some areas, but there's still a lot of work to do.
Yeah, that's that particular aspect of what you describe is very important to me as a mental health professional, and it has been a concern to me from the beginning. The notion of emotional well-being in the island, and because Puerto Rican people are so resilient, they do what you exactly said. They put on this facade of, oh yeah, yeah, everything is fine. We're just living and celebrating life, but I guess it's very important, and for people listening to this interview, I'm just going to take a moment to just remind everybody that if you're starting to struggle with difficult emotions, you should not bottle them up, and you should express them to somebody that cares, but also to a health or mental health professional. We are actually, I'm happy to say that we're working very hard to bring some national trauma experts to Puerto Rico, hopefully by the end of February. Dr. Janet Sadina has been working with my team here with Voice of Puerto Rico, and Friends of Puerto Rico have offered to also assist in the process in New York to forego the cost of bringing her to the island with her team of professionals to do a big training for mental health and educational professionals in the island. We'll be announcing that more formally soon once everything is kind of ready to go. But yeah, the mental health of the island is of great concern to me. I have a group that I can send you information if you want to share the information with your friend. Their name,
Please.
the company is called uh, Grupo CEPI. Grupo CEPI in Puerto Rico, and I think they have several offices all over the island. I think it's a group of about 40 mental health professionals that work all over the island. So I'll send you the information later. Um, Anything else that you think people should know here in the U.S., here in Washington, that people should become more aware at this point? As Christmas come in, businesses are still not opening, people are out of work, great proportion of the island is out of electric. There's the notion of water services, water not being fully drinkable yet. That has been a concern. Insurances, I guess they're struggling in the repayment process. Uh, things don't seem to be moving toward normal yet. Yet we seem to be in a place where people are forgetting that this happened 90 days ago, 95, 96 days ago, and things are not moving toward normal yet. Or if they are, they're moving very slowly by regions. Anything else that you think that we should know?
I think it's important to know that reconstruction and rebuilding will take a long time. Puerto Rico will not go back to normal after the news cycle ends. We are going to need help. It's not just a hand me down or a influx of cash to get us going and put up new power lines. It's a reconstruction of the island into a more workable, reliable, and efficient system that can weather these crises in the future. If you look at weather predictions for next year, the models that are coming out say there's a possibility of 15 storms in the hurricane season next year, and 7 of those storms could have potential of becoming a hurricane. We have a very limited time to at least get things back to normal and have an infrastructure that maybe won't, if another hurricane like this occurs, won't be untouched, but would allow us to recover more quickly. If we go from disaster to disaster, no power, the economy is in bad shape, the new taxes, a long recovery, and then another hurricane or another crisis happens, it's going to be unlivable. And we are an island of over 3 million American citizens, and when it becomes a national problem, people just pick up their bags and move to the States. And that's a crisis for us here because we're suddenly losing able-bodied, well-educated workforce, and suddenly have in the States this influx of immigrants who are coming in without all the processes necessary to relocate effectively. It's not like I'm moving theoretically. I'm moving to Florida because I have a job and I already have an apartment, but I'm moving in with my family without a certainty of a job, trying to get my kids into schools. And that's still a problem. It's a problem for us and for the communities, the states where people move. So it's getting Puerto Rico back on track. It's something that's beneficial for us in the island and for the nation because it stops it from becoming a larger issue that affects even more communities.
Yeah, I think you hit on a very important point that a lot of people are not talking about the mass exodus of professionals and in general of people out of Puerto Rico. And you hit a couple of crucial aspects of the mass exodus. People should, if they're considering moving to the US, they should plan.
Yeah.
And have a plan of action and reach out to the community where they're planning to move to, and have some sort of connection or some sort of plan that involves interviews, job interviews, locations. Because at least from my colleagues in Florida, I'm hearing a lot of Puerto Ricans that are ending up in homelessness situation because they come without a plan. So trying to flee from a very bad situation, they walked into a really bad situation, and then with minimal supports, no family, and it becomes kind of a nightmare type of event. So people should plan and should reach out to people in the community. There are groups, there are multiple groups in several states, especially states like Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey, and Florida, that there are large number of nonprofits that are Puerto Rican or Latino specific, and maybe we should actually, I'm going to talk to the people from Voice of Puerto Rico in my group, so we can actually post some information on our Facebook page with relationship to some of these groups that could assist people in and giving them ideas of what needs to happen for relocation. The other thought that I would have on that notion is that people should consider other states. Florida is not the only state in the nation, and it's not the only state that welcomed the Puerto Rican people. Again, I mentioned some: Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey. Virginia actually has a large community of professionals that are from Puerto Rico. Washington D.C., uh, and in general Texas and other states. Puerto Ricans tend to like the lower states because it stays warm.
Yeah, it's warmer and it's a shorter plane ride. That's the
Yeah,
logic.
sugar plane ride. But there are many, many other states that people can move to and are probably less saturated right now than Florida. So yeah, that's a very important aspect of what's happening. I think that, are you familiar right now with the numbers of people that have moved out of the island or not? Last
No,
time I
no,
checked, it was over 100.
yes, not off the top of my head. I know the national demographer was saying that the exodus was slowing down.
Okay.
That people were not leaving in the numbers that happened over the first few weeks, and that makes sense. You know, the most desperate got on planes and just left. The elderly, the children that whose families felt that shouldn't stay here moved, and then as things have started to slowly normalize, it's the trickle has slowed down. But like I said, there's always a possibility if another crisis hits, if the economy collapses, if factories close, if another hurricane hits, whatever, people can just get on a plane and leave.
Right.
And I think it would be a crisis, that mass exodus without planning, because you have the poor and the destitute who move into the states and become they don't may not have the language skills or the work skills to get a job quickly and start depending on government aid, may not receive the same services they did in Puerto Rico, and become a complication for the state or the county or whatever. And then you have the able-bodied, well-trained professionals who leave and all of a sudden create a vacuum in the island that makes it hard to reconstruct after whichever crisis happens.
Right, right. Roberto, thank you for your time and agreeing to join us in this interview for the Voices program. We will post this in our YouTube page, in our Facebook page, and in our page, voiceofpuertorico.com or .com. Um, Thank you again, and say hello to your beautiful wife for me, please.
I will. Thank you very much.
And,
Say hi to
and
your wife and your family as well.
Thank you, thank you. And let's stay connected and keep writing your beautiful posts. It's very important to us to hear from people like you. As you write, we try to share things here in the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Padre nuestro, si es que estás en el cielo,